Hi, everyone. This is a short video about making claims. Um, I am someone who's taught ethics for many, many years, 20, more than 20 years. And so this is a little shortcut on how to think through what it would be to write out um, a claim. It can be an ethical claim, but it also can be an emotional claim, a claim from one's own personal experience. Um, and teaching disability studies in particular, which I'm doing now, I'm discovering that whenever students are writing about either their point of view or what they're getting from new content, or if they're talking about things that are highly politically charged or ethically very complex, the way in which they describe or they respond to provocations and questions that I raise is very often with a very strong response, a very rigid way of addressing that issue or problem, which in fact might be there's a lot to still discuss. So difficult conversations, complex ethical claims, politically charged content. And I've done work on everything from reproduction to environmental claims, even business claims, criticisms of capitalism and economics, um, and obviously extensively about disability and disability bias as a threat and a harm. And by doing this, my goal for students has always been not to change their minds about what they think, but it's always been to really push them to think that when I want to make a claim, that it is something that I want to persuade someone about, and I want to be sound. I want that claim to be a sound claim in the sense that people are really going to want to listen to me, even if they don't see it from my point of view, that they're going to feel that my point of view is at least worth attending to or at least worth talking more about. So a soundness in making claims and making sure that people are open to negotiating those claims, I think becomes a way in which, especially in the US context, we can have conversations about things that are extremely difficult, extremely politically charged, but that allow for benefit, that we can really, by having that conversation, be better off in understanding the ways in which people make those claims for good reasons, or those people make those claims because they are emotionally and personally attached to them. It feels like a lot of risk to give up this claim. So being really mindful and thoughtful about the fact that when we are dealing with things that are really sensitive, that we're still able to be open to being persuaded and also um, being persuasive, and without it becoming something where it's like it's just my opinion, because very often some of these claims cannot be left to opinion. It's just not possible. It's so dangerous and harmful for those people who are most vulnerable. um, the most dangerous conversations is the ones that talk about cases of which one, even though they're making a strong claim, have no bearing on. They have no risk. They have no, what they sometimes call, skin in the game. So when people make these kinds of claims, my goal is that we learn how to give that credit to the claim, but also to not create a new generation of students who think that's how they can make claims. And so I have a chart. I'm going to share my screen. And this is a chart that I used for a number of years. But I feel like it's a nice cheat sheet for how to navigate some of these things that, like, when students say, like, I don't know what I think, or I don't know how to talk about it. So the chart is 4 major boxes with some information above and below. So on the 2 left green squares, there are the strong claims. It is the always all or the never none. And of course, those very strong claims we hear a lot of. They're not very sound because usually they are so strong. They're just not persuasive. If you're saying everyone all the time, in a lot of our talking head, news programs, things like that, we get there's something very sensational about the loudness and the strength of all of us, or no one, never. Um, and those strong claims, even though they have a lot of currency in our kind of media spaces, um, they need to be supported, and usually with reasons. They're usually ideological, and they usually need some kind of rationale, um, even to be heard, I think. When you say all of them or everyone, or you say no one, really at least a working rationale to make it moderately interesting to listen to would be required. I always like when people use this language to get louder because they think it's going to be more persuasive. um, where that I think the really good academic work and ethics work happens, and especially for pedagogical purposes, for teaching purposes, the soft claim is a powerful claim. Um, I call it soft. Sometimes it's called weak. I don't really like that word. Gentle. I like gentle, gentle claim. When we make claims about many or most, I think what we're doing is we're qualifying it, because that also means we're open to some kind of working negotiation. Few and exceptional, I think a lot of great claims are made on the exception, that you have enough small case examples, and especially in disability studies where the main the main meaningfulness of disability studies content is that it's nothing about us without us, that disabled people are the source of the content. And those narrative voices or those narrative positions, they might be few, but they are persuasive because of how exceptional they are. So the exceptional and the few, when you make a claim that only involves the few and the exceptional, can actually be a really provocative, persuasive, and sound claim, because you have to support it with evidence. And by supporting it with evidence, it leaves someone receiving or on the receptive end of the claim, reading it or having to listen to it, at least willing to figure out how that claim is sourced, right? So where do you get that claim from? Where do you get that point of view from? Um, I find that when I work in ethics, working through the narrative evidence, testimonial evidence is really um, fundamental to making quality, moving, provocative claims. It doesn't tend to strike the same kind of political contentiousness. And that's also where a lot of my research is. Even my own experience with pregnancy and miscarriage was a way in which I could take my particular case and make it an allegory for making larger claims about kind of the demands on a pregnant body to produce a child, and how dangerous that is for especially pregnant people who don't successfully produce a child, who have pregnancy loss, and et cetera. So, and that's just particularly with my work, but I find that that's a way to generate claims that are um, really sound. They kind of decompress some of the politically unsound ways in which people make claims. And although that said, I really do like the many and most too, because you will then have to bring in some of the more diligent work of studies, right? So research can be the evidence of the many most claim. And those studies can conflict. And that really then has to give you some room to discourse about what that many most really is about, right? So the claim is already working within a kind of qualification. And then you got to work around like, well, it's many here, and it's only really some in this study, but most here. And so then that becomes a conversation that no one person can make the claim without having to then submit to the demands of persuasiveness and obviously soundness. You can't yell those kinds of claims. You can't force those kinds of claims. And you can't necessarily hunker down and say, well, this is the way I see it. I think the strong claims have a really good function for starting conversations. Um, they have a certain theatrical quality that I think can be interesting. But as an ethicist, I also find them to be um, something that students think works when it doesn't. it's actually worth kind of going for a softer and gentler claim and doing that well than trying to make a really strong claim and making it hollow and empty and um, and poor, right? The poverty of a strong claim is that you can give a reason, but no one's convinced. So I hope this might be really interesting and useful to both maybe students who are working in theory and as it relates to practical, ethical, and political concerns, but also for educators and maybe other professors and teachers. And I'm always open to a conversation. You find me anywhere in the internet for those kinds of conversations. I like having them, not just with my students and with my colleagues. All right. Thanks.